Let's get started. So let me first say good afternoon to everybody. My name is Christian Contreras, and I am the ePay Applications Manager here at ISS. And along with me and on this call, we have the members of my team. You may hear the name Tiandra, Beth, or Jade, and they are also kind of listening into the call to kind of go through and see whether concerns or issues may pop up today. Now, right now, I do have everyone currently muted for our Blueforce basic training here. So on my slide here that you'll see, I do have a little step-by-step here on how to go and put some questions in if should there be any questions. Now, throughout the session, since we do have a little group here, not that overwhelming size of group, I want to go ahead and unmute you, and we'll let you ask questions if it need be or interact. But for the majority of the call, I'm going to have everyone muted. That way, if we can just minimize the background noise and side conversations. But to that, if at any point on your control panel there, when you went to the go to webinar, and you signed in and everything, there's a little pop-up bar that popped up on the right-hand side. That little control panel has a questions area. If you go and click on questions, you go in there and type in any question you have, and it'll pop up on my screen, and I'll be able to see what question it was, and I'll kind of circle back and incorporate that into the conversation. So please use those questions as needed. And like I said, periodically I'll unmute everybody and just check in with everybody. So kind of what our purpose of today's call is just to provide you an overview and kind of just a basic introduction to Blueforce. Now, I scheduled this webinar for about an hour and a half. I don't think we'll go an hour and a half, but those that know me and know I'm laughing on the phone call, I can talk. So we'll go through and we'll go through the basics. Like I said, I'll open it up. If there's any questions, any concerns that pop up out of this call, and we'll make sure that everyone understands and is familiar and feels comfortable with entering any timesheets that may have been missed, or more so having the employees punching in and punching out into the system. So a lot of questions. Don't hold back. If there's a question, anything that's concerning you, please type it in there, ask me, and we'll address it. So initially, before we can get rolling and kind of get into the nuts and bolts of the actual ePay product, let's talk about kind of the big picture. What's the overview? How is the system collecting time? What's the system doing? So the way it works, and this is kind of just a big overview process flow, as you can kind of see. From the left side to the right, the left side shows you there's 4 methods of collecting time in the system. Now, as you see on there, keying in time cards is not a approved method. So I know many of you have just started using Blueforce, obviously with our transitions and kind of just starting up these new job sites. So that's understandable. But the plan here is to get each of the sites to either use Mobile Punch, which is a smartphone app that's on the app, and anyone's smartphone, we can load it on there and have them punch in and punch out. Telephone, which is a phone-in system, which is called phone-in, that the employees can call a toll-free number to punch in and punch out. The web, which is a web punch, which is a internet website that the employee could visit to punch in and punch out. And then lastly, time clock, which is the time clocks are called Walters, Wall terminals it's Walter for short. And those Walter time clocks allow the employees to use their fingerprint as the biometric functionality on those clocks to punch in and punch out. Now, these are the 4 approved methods to punch in and out into our system. Now, once you punch in, all of these methods will then transfer that punch into Blueforce. And the term Blueforce here is the name of the product that we're going to talk about today. Blueforce, and kind of think of it this way: ePay is the name of the product. The big picture is the name of the company that we work with to do our time collection. Blueforce is the software, sort of like Microsoft Word is the small component of the big picture of Microsoft. Same concept. So Blueforce is where you're going to go in there and actually see the employees' punches, review those punches, add any manual entries, manual time cards that employees forgot to punch in, forgot to punch out, haven't punched in for whatever reason. That's where you would go into Blueforce to take care of all that. Now, part of this process that we'll go through as well today is not only are you going to be looking at time and reviewing time, you're also going to be going in there and have the ability to go and run reports if need be, you'll be able to go in and do some other functionalities. So we'll slowly graduate and get there too. But today we're going to be focusing on just getting time and going through the process of submitting that time. And I'll go into more explanation on what submitting is. But real quick, submitting is just basically you signing off saying that time is good, I've reviewed, I've had all the employees' time is in there, we're good to go. That way, the next step of the process eventually would be to get that payroll that we've just submitted and get that over to corporate payroll to obviously get paid off, and we can fund pay cards, do direct deposits, and paychecks and stuff like that. They're on the right-hand side. Now, we'll say the part that gets a little confusing here for everyone that's the first time getting used to this is getting the data into Blueforce and getting the data out of Blueforce. Once, as I mentioned a while ago, Blueforce is just the agent or the software, whatever you want to reference it as. It's the piece or the component here that does the time collection, and that's all it's doing. It's collecting the time from these 4 devices on the left-hand side of the screen here, and then it's going to compile any rules, apply any rules, whether it be a union rule, a lunch rule, a shift differential rule. It's just collecting the time and processing it. We actually pay the employee and do any benefits, any deductions, benefit deductions, garnishments, stuff of that nature. All that is done over on the JD Edwards side. JD Edwards is our accounting, or what we refer to as our ERP system. So the way this works, once again, time comes in to Blueforce from those 4 approved methods. Blueforce then processes it, everything. You as a user will then go in there and submit it. If you are a submitter, you'll go in there and be asked to submit that time. And then we also have an approver. I think a few of you on the call are approvers. You actually come in after this approver kind of as a secondary step or a second set of eyes to look over the time and approve that time to now for corporate payroll to actually take over here in San Antonio. And they actually then process the rest of the payroll through JD Edwards. And at that point, we either print paychecks, which is very, very rare now, but mostly everyone will be a direct deposit or a pay card. So that is just a quick overview of how kind of the whole big picture of ePay, Blueforce, JD, and how everything kind of goes in hand in hand. So just checking here if we have any questions. Nothing yet, so we're good to go. So let me go in here and check one thing real quick. And I'm going to go ahead and unmute everybody real quick. So if there's any questions or concerns, you may want to go ahead and mute your side there if you don't want to ask anything. But I'm going to unmute everybody. So if anyone has any questions, you want to check in, want to say something, you're more than welcome to speak up now. And I'll give you 10 seconds to check in. All righty. So let's go ahead and we'll proceed on. I'll go ahead and mute everybody one time. And let's go back in and let's proceed with kind of the next phase of this whole process. Now, in working with, primarily I've been working with Lorraine and Chad, for those that may know those 2 individuals. We've been working with them to kind of get a good picture of roles and kind of who's going to be doing what at each of the different sites. Now, for this call, I invited all of the Adidas group, and I invited the Shire group that just joined us, went live on the 1st as well. And it actually invited the whole general IFS team, a few from our Canada sites as well. So we've got a kind of a mixed bag of business on this phone call. But everyone does the process the same. That's the beauty of Blueforce. Everyone's doing the same way, regardless of, you know, what your customer, what we're doing. If we're cleaning, we're doing engineering. It's all done the same way in Blueforce. So the question then becomes is, you know, what is each of us going to be doing as part of the system, as part of Blueforce? So these are the different roles that we have available for everyone to be assigned to. Now, the majority of you on this phone call are going to be your submitters and approvers. But I want to show this slide because there are other roles for other individuals that are maybe key personnel, maybe leads, something, or maybe a general supervisor at your job sites, that they can actually still participate with Blueforce and not actually have to do anything necessarily with the system itself. And Let me explain here. So let's start here first, kind of going back um, with the first general role here, reviewer. So the general role of reviewer is for those sites that have time clocks, and this is really just for those time clock sites. As you know, with working with a time clock, you need to have the ability to register an employee on the clock, and that means you have to go in there and make sure that they can punch in and punch out using their fingerprint. Now, in order to get them registered, someone there has to be able to do that. Well, typically, most of us on this phone call may have a bigger role at the job site, so that we may not be readily available to register somebody. If you have a supervisor that works your shifts, a lead, a key personnel person there that's always there on site, you may want to register them as a reviewer. That allows them to go in and basically register the employee, and they can actually review mismatched fingerprints and take care of any little issues at the time clock by just giving them this role. Now, once again, they don't have access to Blueforce per se to go in there and make edits on the computer, but they can actually do some basic functionalities at the time clock. So that saves us some time there. And once again, that is a reviewer role, and that's only for site supervisors for the Walter time clock. Secondarily to that, we have a little more upgraded role. It's called editor. And an editor basically has all the access that the reviewer can do. For example, they can do the clock functionalities as well, but they actually have access to Blueforce, where they can actually log in and see time cards. They can add time cards. They can make edits to time cards as needed, but they do not submit, which is the key role here for this call, the submitters and approvers. But an editor allows you, frees you up a little bit more. They can kind of review the punches for you and allow you as a submitter to come back later and just actually submit and basically sign off that the payroll is good to go. So that editor role is a good functionality. Now, we do note here that it says no pay rates. That no pay rates is just letting you know that that role does not allow the employee to see anyone's pay rate. So when they go in the system, they'll see this time, the punches in and outs, but they will not be able to see anybody's pay rate. So that's always a benefit in this role, because someone can go in there and, once again, typically a site supervisor or a key person there at the job site to kind of be another set of eyes that are going to help with making sure everyone's punching in, punching out, and do the reviews. Now, one thing I'll mention here shortly is that we stress that you do daily time reviews. And we say this all the time around the country, and the first time I say it, they're like, oh, I don't have time to do it daily. Well, this is going to be important that we do spend 5 minutes. It really doesn't take long at all to review your time on a daily basis. Once you get the employees on the knack of clocking in and clocking out all the time properly, there is not going to be an issue of editing and editing, but reviewing your time on a daily basis. And I'll go into a little bit more of that in a little bit, so hold that thought. The third role here is the submitter with pay rate role. And there's also a submitter without pay rates. Now, the submitter is most of you on this phone call, and the submitter is essentially we call it a district manager, but it could be any type of any management personnel that actually has access to Blueforce. They actually log in there. You review everything that the editor and reviewer can do. So once again, you have access to register employees. You have access to go in there and, like the editor, go and add and edit time cards. The only difference between the editor and submitter really is that you now have the ability to submit. And once again, as a submitter, you are going to be asked to do this on a weekly basis, in which you go in there and submit all your timesheets after you review them. You basically just click a little link that says submit, and it essentially locks the timesheet from any further edits. At that point, the next role, which is the approver, comes in here and does their final review. Now, in saying that, the submitter is a key role. Once again, it's a weekly process you have to submit. So essentially, from pay week to pay week, you're just saying, I've reviewed the time, everyone's time is in there, we're signing off on it, we're good. As a submitter, a good rule of thumb, and it's just kind of for everyone on this phone call, if you're doing your daily reviews like we're stressing you do, there's no reason why you cannot submit your timesheet Monday morning, following a pay week and on Friday. As everyone knows, we do a pay week of Saturday through Friday. If you're weekly, obviously if you're bi-weekly, it's going to go to 2-week period. However, in the system, in Blueforce, every pay week has a specific timesheet. So weeklies, you'll submit just one time every week. If you are, every pay period, sorry. If you are a bi-weekly period, then you're going to go in there and submit 2 times, one each week, twice per pay period. And I'll show you that process here momentarily. But once again, submitters, you have an access level of with rates or without pay rates, depending on how we are asked to set that up for you. The last one is the approver, and the approver is basically has all the rights that I just talked about from every other role before that. The only major difference now is now you are the second set of eyes, and you are the last line of defense before your payroll goes over to corporate payroll for processing. And what I mean by that is at any point you can reject submitted timesheets. So if you know that submitter has messed up or frankly didn't review their time, you can reject that timesheet and say, hey, fix it, buddy, and then come back and talk to me when you're done. So you've got the last line of defense that you can basically control if I'm going to let this payroll go through or if I'm going to just send it back and have them fix it before I sign off and say corporate payroll take over and proceed with funding the direct deposits and funding the pay cards. So the approver is a pretty powerful role, and it's the most, I would say, not to take away anything from the submitter, but these submitter and approver are both the most important roles of this whole process to make sure the employees get paid accurately and on time. Now, going back to kind of the submitting and approving steps, submitters, if my kind of standard here and kind of what corporate payroll would like to hear me say is that we submit all our time by the end of Monday. Monday afternoon, there's no reason why you can't submit your time by then, but no later than the end of Monday for end of business. You submit your timesheets. Approvers, this will give you time. The quicker that the submitter submits their time, the quicker you can get on your reviews and the quicker you can sign up on your timesheets. But corporate payroll here wants that done by no later than noon on Tuesday, noon local time, your own local time, and get in the system and process. That gives them plenty of time to go through, review. If there's any issues, any errors, they can come back to you pretty quickly before Wednesday comes along. That way they can have plenty of time still to fund those paychecks and whatnot. But as I'm going to say multiple times on this phone call, this webinar is giving you the tools and showing you how to take care of your payroll. So there's no need to send anything to corporate payroll anymore after this call. You're going to be going there and entering the time. You're going to be going in there and submit and approve the time. And now you're going to be reviewing your time from the employees being punching in and punching out. So let me stress again, what we go through today is going to turn the keys over to you, put it in your hands, and you'll be able to go through going forward, making sure that everything is being done in Blueforce. So kind of recap what I just mentioned on this thing before we actually go into Blueforce and start messing around with the program, the system itself. This is kind of a flow, and I'll share this with you. Give me 1 second. There it goes. All right. Sorry about that. I will be giving this presentation out to everyone after this call as well, so you have all these slides and kind of what everything does. But kind of in a brief overview, editor and submitter have daily roles. Submitters also have a weekly role, and the approvers also have that weekly role. So bottom line, I'll share this with everyone, and you kind of see kind of the big things that you need to be doing and staying on track going forward. So I think I hopefully answered that question on the deadline basically for submitting end of Monday. So you basically, payroll ends Friday evening, Friday nights, the pay week ends. Then you have the weekend. Obviously, if you're working the weekend, you can work on it then. If not, you have all day Monday to get it submitted. And then approvers, you want to make sure that the approvers can actually go and take care of their business by noon on Tuesday. Now, all those times are going to be local to you, so it's not just San Antonio time. San Antonio is on Central Time Zone, but most of you on the phone call are on the Eastern time zone. So once again, this is on your time and whatnot. So good questions have been asked. Good. All right. 2 other terms I want to talk about before we go into Blueforce, and I'll give you a quick. We'll go through the actual demo of showing you how to use the system. But 2 terms. We have time cards and we have time sheets. Now you'll hear me refer to these a lot going forward, but here is how you determine the difference. The time cards are going to reflect the employee's raw punches. So when I go in the system and look at a time card, I'm going to be able to go in there and see that the employee punched in at 7:01 a.m. and they left at 3:37 p.m. Those are the raw punches that will be reflected on the time card. It will not show any show overtime. It's not going to show pay differentials. It's not going to show you any lunch breaks that may be automatically set up in the system to be deducted automatically. This is where you're going to go in there and add and change any hours that are worked. So time cards means work time. And that's something that's ingrained in your mind. Time cards means work time. Now the timesheet view is a separate view, and a separate view reflects time after system calculations. What that basically means is the time that I clocked in at 7:01 to 3:37 p.m. in my example, it's going to go overflow over to the timesheet view, and in the timesheet view, the system's going to apply any system rules. So the system calculations and rules that are in there, like OT, pay differentials, and lunch, that get applied. So we have all your lunch rules in here. If you've provided those to us, and what that basically means is if you want lunch to be automatically deducted for that employee, we have that set up in the system for you. If that's something you're interested in doing, let us know after this call, and we'll be happy to set that up for your specific job sites. If there's any pay differentials that we need to worry about. For example, maybe the night shift works and gets additional $2 an hour. Then we need to know that information so we can program that into the system as well. So stuff along that line we need to know. But the OT rules, those are ready to go and those are already programmed. So you'll see overtime calculated accurately based on your local jurisdiction, whether it be a state level, local level, union level, whatever it may be, is driving that overtime. We've got that already programmed into the system. It's one of the first things we need to get Blueforce going, so that's ready to go. But the timesheet side is where you're only going to be focusing on non-worked hours primarily. Now, you'll be able to see all the worked hours and all the calculations, but if you have to key in anything in the system, that's where you're going to do your non-worked hours, like your vacation, your sick, your holiday situations where someone didn't work it but is entitled to it, stuff along those lines. So once again, time cards is worked hours, timesheets is non-worked hours. And then you can kind of go from there, and I'll show you some examples as we now dive into Blueforce. So let me go and close out my presentation here. Give me 1 second. And I am going to bring up Blueforce. And this is what Blueforce actually looks like. And when you actually go into Blueforce the first couple times, you're going to quickly see a lot of different icons here in the middle, of which you probably, and I'll say the majority of you on this phone call are not going to see quite as many icons as you do now because of my login. But I will tell you, when you log in, you're actually going to be able to see this middle piece, and this is kind of the general progression of how ePay and a Blueforce flow. Now, on the question or basis of logins, many of you already have received your logins and you've already logged in and have already played around with Blueforce a little bit. So kudos to you. Congratulations. You're a little ahead of the game. Now, many of you also have not, the other half of you have not ever seen Blueforce. It's the first time you're looking at a screen. And many of you have not even received your logins as of yet. My team is actually setting up logins for many of you right now. So you may be getting emails while you're getting this phone call. And the emails will be directed not from me or not from anybody specifically. It'll be from blueforce.com. And when you get that email, it's from Blueforce. You may want to check your spam messages or your junk mail, but typically this should pass through. And I'm saying that on behalf of those Shire and Adidas accounts because I'm not sure how those local servers will react to an email from Blueforce. But when you get that email, or if you have an ISS email address, you probably won't have a problem. But nevertheless, when you get that email, you can open it up. It'll give you a link to getting into Blueforce here, which is nothing more for everyone on this phone call. It's nothing more than www.blueforce.com/login. And I'll back out of here in a little bit and show you how to log in. But once you get that email, you'll have your credentials there. You have your username and your password. Your password initially is probably a little wild, a little weird, but you can actually at any point when you log into Blueforce, come to the very top of the screen and come up to this little icon called My Profile. And in here, there is a little link where you can actually go in there and change your password to whatever you want. So you have the ability there to do that. Nevertheless, let's get in there, log in the first time, and let's get used to the system. That's our goal here for today. So I'm just going to check questions here, and nothing's coming through, so we're good to go there. So as I mentioned, the general progression of the system is that obviously we get employees and jobs in the system, then we get to go into time cards, then we get to go into timesheets, and then finally we get to run payroll. Those three that I circled are what we're going to focus on today. The two on the left, the employees and jobs, you really have no control over, because those employees and jobs are coming from our JD Edwards system. The system interfaces with Blueforce, drops those in there for us, and then from there we can then apply jobs and employees to our time cards and see how they punched in and punched out, etc. So that middle, those three circles are what we're going to focus in on right now. Now, as I switch over into Blueforce here, I also sent out a document probably about 11:15-ish or so. Say about an hour ago, you may have gotten an email from me, and it had two attachments on it. And one of those attachments was just entitled Daily Review of Time Cards. That attachment is what we're going to kind of go through. I'm going to go through the process of how you look at time, where do you look at time, and kind of just the general basis of reviewing time, and then obviously how to add time to the system. That little document, 6 pages, is a quick kind of overview that you can use as a guide going forward. And that's kind of what, if you want to pull it out or you want to print it off real quick, you're more than welcome to. You don't need to, just listen up as I go through this process. So I'm going to clear my screen here, and I'm actually going to do something real quick. I'm actually going to log back out of here so we can actually all start from scratch. All right. So like I mentioned earlier, and there's a whole link up here at the top of my screen. If you're looking at the very top of my window here, you'll see there's a whole long link here. But in reality, if I just take this link and just do this, which is www.blueforce.com/login. You don't even have to put in the HTTP or any of that junk. It's www.blueforce.com/login. That'll take you to this website. This site now will require 3 bits of information for you. Now, all of us will be using company as ISS. It's not case sensitive in this case, but in all cases, it's got to be ISS for company. Login ID, it's going to be whatever login ID was assigned to you. In most cases, it's first name dot last name, just depending on, if that was taken or not, or if you have a different maybe login ID set up for your email address. We kind of take that in consideration, but nevertheless, whatever login credential is sent to you via that email, you can then enter it here. Now for me, it's just my first initial and dot last name. I'm kind of old school here, been a long time, so I still fall under the old of first initial dot last name. And then lastly, you have password, and then the password is going to be whatever password was assigned to you. Now, like I mentioned, it can get a little funky because it could be 8 characters of characters, numbers, and letters, so it could get a little confusing for you. But I do assure you that if you can log in to that first time, you can go in there and change your password as needed. Now, if at any point through the course of using Blueforce you do forget your password, you do have a little link here that you can always click on Forgot Password, fill out the information that's asked of you, and then the system will then send you a newly generated password. It doesn't allow you to change it to whatever you want here. It just allows you to, get a new password created for you. So you'll get another characters, numbers, and letters mixed up together in a nice long password. But nevertheless, that's that link there. I'm just going to bring it up in case you ever need it in the future. All right, and our passwords actually are good for roughly, just depends. I think most times about 90 days, but just know that you will get prompted through the course of using Blueforce to reset your password at some point down the road. But we'll get there. That'll be a different conversation for another time. So ISS for company, login ID, whatever it may be, and then your password. My password, I'm going to type it in here. Hang on. All right, there we go. And once I've typed in my password, then I can just hit login, and I am into the system. Now, as I mentioned, you're only going to see the middle row that I have here on the screen. And the first thing we want to do is going to go into what's referred to as time cards. Now, as I mentioned, time cards is where you're going to go and see your worked hours. Now, the way the system works is many of us on the phone call may have access to more than one job site. If you have access just to one job site, this next piece is going to be very simple for you. If you have multiple job sites, the system is going to give you the ability to tell it if you want to work with all of your sites, or if you just want to look at one specific job site, want to review my time cards. Typically, as you get familiar with the system, you're probably going to say, you know what, show me everything in one fell swoop. But nevertheless, when I go into time cards and I click there, the screen is going to pull up down below. It's going to show you a whole bunch of groupings. It's going to show you a lot of different jobs. It's going to show you a lot of information, just depending on your access. Now, since I am an administrator, I have access to everything. I have access to 16,963 jobs across the country. And believe me, we're not going to talk about 16,000 jobs in this phone call. We're going to talk about 1 or 2 jobs. But nevertheless, as I go through here, you have the ability of determining what jobs you want to work with. Now, if you only have one job site you're working with, the system will not even prompt you for the screen. It'll just take you straight to the time cards, which is a good thing. If you have 3 or 4 jobs you're in charge of, you'll see 3 or 4 jobs on the list. And all you have the ability at this point is to go through here and pick which jobs you want to work with. And you can just check mark the ones you want, or at the very top of the screen, you can say select all, and it'll pick every single job that you have access to working with. I'm not going to do select all because I don't want to pick 16,000 records to work with. So what I'm going to do is you also have a ability up at the top to do some searching for a specific job. Now, for everyone on this phone call, I would say stay away from the search. Just go in there when you go to the screen, just check mark the jobs you want to work with. That's the easiest way. You're not going to have many at all showing up on your screen anyhow. For the purposes of this call, I'm actually going to use some records from our company here in San Antonio. We have a specialized services group that does janitorial services here in San Antonio, and we're going to use their jobs for our examples today. So kind of the way it works is when I go in there and click on time cards, like I said, it will prompt you for a job selection if you have more than one job. If you don't have any more, if you just have one job, it's going to take you straight to the screen. Now this screen that you're looking at, it looks very noisy. It looks a lot of action, a lot of commotion going on, and that is perfectly normal, believe it or not. Now at the top of the screen, you do have the first thing that should come to mind or come to your view is your date range. That date range allows you to see what date range is showing down in the punches down below. Now, in the punches down below, you will see, we're going to take it line by line, but you see a lot of colors. You see some blacks, you see some reds, and typically when you see reds, that means, oh, crap, there's some caution there. Something's wrong with that punch. And that's true here too. If you see anything that's in red or kind of blaring at you like that, that's kind of letting you know there's something up with that record that you need to pay attention to. But you have other colors, you have some greens, you have some yellows. We're going to talk about that here momentarily. So first thing, like I said, when you come to the screen, you have your date range. That date range says, what is the date range of the punches that I want to look at right now? If you're doing this on a daily review perspective, look at yesterday's punches. Because obviously, we're looking at probably when we're doing our daily review, we're looking at what happened yesterday, not necessarily what happened today. Because today is, you have a lot of employees that are still working, probably. Like for all the examples here, you see on the statuses here, let me circle a couple of them. You'll see a few of them say waiting for out punch. All these say waiting for out punch in here, just letting you know that these people are actually working. So Alexander, Demetrio, Lucia, etc., Jeffrey, all of them are punched in, and that's what I'll get to momentarily. You'll see the punch in time and the date, which is today's date, and all around that 10:40 to 11 o'clock time frame. So they're all punched in right now working. So to that, those punches are not bad punches. They're just drawing your attention, letting you know that something is, we're still waiting. The system's waiting in anticipation that something's going to occur and coming out, for example, the waiting out. We're waiting for this person to out punch, and it's just waiting patiently until that happens. But the way you kind of go in here on this time card view, and I'm actually going to go back because this screen shows you a lot of things that are waiting to be happened because we have this date range going through today's date. But if we want to see anything that ended on yesterday and only focus on yesterday's punches, let's see what's in for Sunday if we have anything on this job site. For any of our job sites here. Yep, we have a few. And as you go through here, it's not quite as noisy. You see some other colors, but it looks nice and a little more organized. So one thing I will mention to everyone is at the top of your time card grid, at the very top of this grid, you have what's referred to as a time card legend. This time card legend allows you to click, you can click on that link, and it'll provide you basically a legend of what all the colors mean. And it's just a quick reference. At any point, I can come over here, which I'm going to do now, and click on it. It's going to pop up this little window. And this little window is just there for your guidance, should you need it and get confused with all the different colors that are available out there. And trust me, if you are using Walter Clock's phone and you're doing all those four-time collection methods and you have them all working for your site, that could get confusing. But most of you are one dedicated, either doing web punch or just doing clocks or just doing mobile. You're going to be fine. You're not going to have all this different noise and all this commotion going on the screen. So the way this works is when you come in here, the very top portion of the screen is your search window. The search window provides you the ability to see the date range, and by default, it's going to show all punches from the source of all punches, meaning it's going to show you everything and anything that's been collected for that job. But on the far left-hand side, you have the ability of picking a specific job or a specific employee. Now, these two are driven, these two fields, job and employee, are driven based on that job selection criteria you did at the very beginning. So if I told the system I want to work with 2 jobs, then I can only pick from the list up here of those 2 jobs. So anything that says all selected jobs means those are all the jobs that I just selected momentarily, just a few minutes ago, before I came to the screen. But you have the ability here and say, you know what, maybe I picked 5 jobs over there to work with, but now I only want to see 1. You can change your mind here. It's perfectly fine. The system's not going to get gripe at you because for changing your mind. But you can hit the drop down and say, you know what, I only want to work with, let's see if I can find that job. Let's see, so seeing all the punches, I want to work with 501, let's see, keep passing it. 501-9804, Ingram Park Mall is the only one I want to look at. Well, if I only want to look at that one, I have the ability of picking any specific employee, or I want to say all employees. Pick my date range for the 9th to the 9th, meaning I only want to see 1 day. And then I'm going to hit search over here on the far right-hand side. When I hit search, it's going to change my view at the bottom of the screen. It's going to make everything reflect just that one, job in this case. Now you'll see down below at the bottom of the grid, you'll see a column called job. And this is letting you know this is the job that you're currently working with, and this is the job that are related to these punches. So search is the first part. Go through and tell the system what you want to look at. As a beginner step, it might be best for you to leave everything as all up there for all selected jobs and all selected employees. That way you see everything that you've selected when you logged in. Now, at any point, if you say, you know what, I changed my mind. I picked 2 jobs to start with. Now I want to pick 2 other jobs to start working with. Now you can always go back, log out, and start all over if you wanted to. That's always an option. And for a beginner, sometimes the users do that because they feel more comfortable. They know how they got to that point. But rest assured, on the left-hand column here, you do have and you can see at the very bottom left-hand corner here, you see a little list of job numbers and names. Up at the very top of that list, you have a select. You also have a clear. What that basically means is if I click on clear, the system says, all right, I'm going to forget what you told me to select a little while ago, and now give you the opportunity to go in there and select the jobs I want to go to use now. If I click on just select here, it's going to allow me to add jobs to my current selection criteria. So if I selected 2 jobs to start with, and I come in here and click on select, the system's going to allow me to add more jobs to that. So maybe I can work with 5 jobs instead of just 2. If I hit clear, like I mentioned, it clears your search criteria altogether, and you start from scratch in selecting the jobs you want to work with. So that's there, right there on the left-hand side for you, ready to go. If you should ever need it, just know that that's there as a side note. Now, if you're following along on my daily review and editing a time cards document, that's the top of page 2. The top of page 2 kind of goes through the clear functionality and goes to the top of the window that I just currently mentioned. So I'm going to go over to page 3, and we're going to talk about some of the different messages you see in a time card. Now, once again, for everyone on this phone call, if their work hours, this is where you're going to spend most of your time and when you're in Blueforce. And I guarantee you, even if you're a submitter and even if you're an approver, you're probably going to spend most of your time in the time card view because you're looking at work time. Now, when I go in here, like I mentioned, you have waiting for out punch. The system's just saying that this person, Robert Martinez in this case, is currently punched in as of yesterday because we told the system only look at yesterday's punches up here at the top of the screen. So it's only going to pull up 4-9. But if it's waiting for an out punch, that means that he still hasn't punched out. He's working a long shift tonight. Today he's right on his 15th hour, or more so, he probably just forgot to clock out. So that waiting for out punch, that's why it's in red. It's trying to draw your attention, letting you know that there's something you might have to do with that time record at some point here. Some things down below, you see approval pending. And let me go ahead and erase my drawings here and show you approval pending. So you have a couple here that say approval pending. Whenever you see approval pending, that's letting you know that the employee had an issue during the punch-in process. And what that means more specifically is approval pending. You'll see that anytime when they go to an employee who's working at a site with a time clock, when they go to the time clock and they have an issue with their fingerprint, meaning, like I mentioned earlier, these clocks are biometric, so they want your fingerprint and you to key in the number. If the employee fails to key in a number with a accurate fingerprint, or more so the fingerprint is not reading because maybe the employee cut their finger or their hands are wet, or which is not too smart with a electronic device, but needless to say, there's an issue with that finger. The system's going to say, you know what, I'm going to let you punch in. I'm going to go ahead and record your punch here, but it's not going to be official until someone comes in here and approves that punch. So as a supervisor, one of the things I'll talk about here in a little bit is you're going to want to go in here and approve those scenarios. But more so, not just go through the habit of approving them daily. You want to go through and find out what is the problem you're having. Do we need to re-register your fingerprint? Do we need to maybe disable that functionality for you to use the fingerprint? What is going on so we can get this fixed? So it's not a daily recurrence for this employee. That's the approval pending. If you're using the phone-in system, which is a call-in system, the employee who use a phone number that's not registered in the system or is not authorized to be used, it'll note here as approval pending. The approval pending should not be taken lightly. There are reasons why the system is telling you this is not right. Please go in there and look at it. And you'll see those punches on the right-hand side. They'll always be in dark, bolded backgrounds, letting you know that there's something wrong with those punches. So they'll always correspond with the approval pending. So it's got kind of a direct link between the two. The other note that you'll see there that looks a lot friendlier and a lot cleaner are these timesheet opens. You see a couple down here that says timesheet open, like one here in the middle. You see another one here in the middle. These, when you see timesheet is open, that is a good thing. That is telling you that the employee punched in and punched out on their own. They had no issues, and that timesheet is in an open state, which basically means that it is ready to be submitted and or approved down the road when it comes to the end of the pay week. So the ultimate goal here is when you go in here and look at your time on a daily basis and review your punches, you want to see all your punches in a timesheet open state, not any of the stuff with red backgrounds, red lettering, stuff like that under status, because that is going to really mess you up. So just keep in mind, the status column is where we look. This is where we want to focus on those bad punches per se. So actually look at your document. If you're following along on page 3 there, you're going to see that step 7 goes through talking about reviewing time cards a little bit and kind of focusing on those waiting for ins, waiting for outs, approval pendings, etc. Those different scenarios where you will see some type of coloring or something to draw your attention to on this time card view. Now, let me go ahead and back out of here and clear my drawings. So what if, and I'm going to go to page 4, which is editing punches now. What if these punches, you come through here and notice that it says waiting for out punch. It is for yesterday. And you know, Mr. Robert Martinez here, you know that he actually left. He's not there at the job site anymore. So it's pretty evident that he just didn't clock out for whatever reason. So at this point, you can now have to, you're going to have to go in there and fill in the blanks because the system's not going to be waiting for the punch anymore. The system's not going to expect him to punch out. So the only savior here is the people that have the access with editor access, submitter access, or approver access. to go in there and actually fill in that blank. So in order to do that, what you're going to do is you're going to edit that punch. Now, one of the things you may have noticed at the very top of the grid as well is you have 4 little buttons that actually allow you to do stuff. One of them is called Zero Out Selected Time Card. Another one's called Edit Selected Time Cards. The other one is Approve Selected Time Cards. And the last one is Export to Excel. First one, Export to Excel. This is the one I like. I like Excel, so I get into this stuff. But if at any point you wanted to go through there and export your time card view to Excel so you can review it or share it with others or kind of print it off, you can do that. So that's the export function. At any point, you can export this grid down below, and the system will take the colors and all that stuff with it too, so you can actually export it as need be. And that's just a side note. It's not nowhere in the document I shared with you. I just want to point that out to you. The one I want to focus on is these out punches first. So these out punches, if you want to go here and edit these, what you're going to do is first come into Edit Selected Time Card. Now, before you can actually use Edit Selected Time Card, you have to go and select basically select the time card you want to work with. Just like it says, edit the selected time cards. But since we haven't selected anything right now, if I go and click on it, it's not going to do anything. It's going to just drive you nuts because it's not doing anything. You have to select the time card you want to work with. Now you can select 1, 2, 10, 20, all, whatever you want to do at any given moment. And what you can do is either check the boxes here on the left-hand side, the ones you want to work with. And you do that by just clicking on those little check boxes. A little black check box will fill in there. And then you can actually come up here and click on Edit Selected Time Card. But once again, Edit Selected Time Card is really the only avenue you have to go and fix a missed punch. For example, someone missing, not clocking in or not clocking out. That's where you're going to actually go to create that, fill in that little blank. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to go and pick Robert Martinez, first one on the list. And when I check on it, you'll see a little black checkbox there, and you'll see that line, the entire time card line turns blue. Well, at that point, I can then click on Edit Selected Time Card, and the system will then provide me a different little window where I can now go and edit that time card. And you'll see from here that I can actually go and click on any of the different time card line fields and go in there and edit them as I need to. Now, the one process that we have here in ISS is that we do not want our employees' in or out punches being touched. If the employee punched in at 21:53, and for whatever reason was maybe a minute or two off, it is what it is. We leave it alone. If the employee punched in 3 hours after the fact that he was there already working, or something phenomenal in that land that's just kind of over the top where they have to merely make a time change, then those are kind of allowed. But in general, rule of thumb is let the employee control his or her in punch. Let them punch in, let them punch out, and let's run with those times. Now, in this case, if the employee didn't punch out, you can actually go in here and fill in that actual out punch. So keep in mind the date, keep in mind the time. The time is in military, what I refer to as military time, but it's basically on a 24-hour clock. So you would actually go in there and know that 21:53 is actually 9:53 p.m. Go in there and fix that punch. So I could actually go in there and fix that punch. If maybe he actually clocked in at 9, was there at 9:30, but had issues at the clock. Well, we can fix that punch if need be. But in this case, he punched in okay, so we're gonna leave it alone. And we're gonna fix that timeout that is right now shown with a little red background. So the timeout, it depends on what time did he punch out. So let's say he worked until 5 a.m. Well, 5 a.m. is just 0500. Now, one thing you're going to notice here is, remember, look at the screen here. The screen is showing the timeout as being on 4/9. So right here it shows 4/9. Well, we know that is incorrect. It was actually on the morning of 4:10. So at that point, you can go in there and make sure that you have the correct timeout and time showing there. If you had tried to hit save, which is coming up here momentarily, with a 4/9 date at 5 a.m., the system is going to scream at you because the system knows there's no way the guy can work backwards there. So you're safe on that method. But keep in mind, always pay attention to the date in and the time in and out. That way you also can confirm. For all of you on the phone call right now, you're not dealing with work orders from my understanding. So I will address that if you ever do have a work order, we do have some scenarios where we want to track like our extra work or one-time jobs that we may, side jobs that we may get as part of this at the job site. In that case, you may get issued a work order, and you'll see the work orders listed here. But more on that, and I'll have a follow-up call, and we'll get some more detail once we get going with work orders, and I'll rope everyone back in for that call. But the one thing that is important after you make any change, even if it's not to the punch, even if it is to the job record, the task record, or the rate type, you can have to always put a reason code as to why the change is being made. Now, if you don't put a reason code here, and this is the #1 missed item when you're doing edit time cards, the system is going to scream at you, or it's not going to scream at you, it's going to show you a nice little red dot on the left of the time card here a little bit, and it's going to say, I don't want to save your punch, I'm not going to take it because you have not provided me a reason code, or you're missing some information somewhere on this line. So right now, if I left this alone, fix my punches, did not put a reason code, and hit save, this is what the system is going to do. It's going to give you that nice little red dot like I mentioned, and you're like, okay, well, what's it red? I don't think I'm missing anything. And rest assured, it's going to happen to you a couple times before you get used to this when you go in here. Just do me a favor. If you see that red dot, take your mouse pointer, little arrow, and let's put the arrow right on top of that red dot. And you're going to notice a little message is going to pop up for you. In this case, it came up, reason code is required. Well, in that case, reason code is required, not a big deal. It tells you that you need to put a reason code. Go over, put a reason code in. Maybe he missed punch and it was the employee's fault. Let's put that in there. We want to be straight up and then and tell them, what is the reason why you didn't punch in? Oh, it's your fault. No big deal. We'll put it in as a reason code. Maybe it's a system issue. Maybe the Walter time clock, for example, like I'll use our Shire site over in Covington, Georgia. Their time clock was having some problems, so they didn't get online last week. So they're going to have to go in there and key in some time. Well, the good reason code for that would be they added the missed punch because it was a system issue. But be correct in what you do here, because we do analyze those. We want to keep records as where our issues are. Why are we having a lot of manual entry into the system? We always notice that this one particular clock is always having a problem, yada yada. So we wanted to make sure that's all in there. But once again, once we're in here making adjustments, you can always change an issue. Maybe the employee is worked a different task. Maybe it wasn't a custodian today. He was actually going to be a porter is his task today. You can change his task there. There is a function here that we probably just briefly will touch on as far as the timesheet goes in a little bit, but you can actually see how it breaks out the different tasks. So we're going to, like I said, the part of this call is just going to get you into it and looking at the time card screen and getting ready to submit time. And then I will follow up with the same group and we'll have another session and we'll go a little bit more depth with some of the other stuff once we get this little foundation going. So I'm looking at questions. I have a question real quick. It says, if we are fixing a punch out issue, should we only ever put in the number of shift hours to avoid adding overtime minutes? Well, here's a catch. If we're going in there and actually putting in a punch out issue, we can't avoid overtime. And if the employee obviously worked the overtime, we're going to pay them the overtime. So when that question is asked that way, it looks like we're, maybe can we shave off a minute or two so we don't pay them overtime? Unfortunately, regardless if they didn't punch in or not, I know it's our word against theirs because we're keying in their time here, but let's be fair to the employee. Let's not cheat them out of that overtime. So put in the, if he was supposed to leave at 5 a.m. in this case, then put in 5 a.m. But if you know for a fact that he stayed till 5:17 a.m., then let's go ahead and keep the 5:17 in there. Now, one thing I will mention, and I'll go ahead and address it now, is the way our time cards work. As a company policy straight across the board, across ISS, all types of different pillars of business that we do, everyone is right now using a rounding rule. And the rounding rule is there to kind of help clean up those special scenarios that we have in the system. So what that does is rounding rule actually rounds your in punch and your out punch to the nearest quarter hour. So that basically means if an employee in this scenario, 2153, that 7 minutes would actually round up to 2200, which is 10 o'clock over on the timesheet view. Now, as I mentioned a while ago, you're not going to see that on the actual view here. Let me actually finish this record and explain a little bit more. So let me close this out. So if I fix my reason code, which I'm not going to save this because it's actually a live record right now, I can now click on save, and the system would actually, once I hit save, will come back over here and update this timeout for me. So it'll actually show correctly. But kind of going back to what I mentioned here, you'll notice you'll see a column here called effective hours. It used to be called rounded hours because you could actually see quickly what those hours were going to be based on our rounding rules in the system. So once again, this is just a view right now for time cards that's going to reflect the in and out punch that the employee actually registered on themselves. This time we'll then go over to timesheets, what I'll show you here momentarily. When we go to the timesheet view, it's actually going to apply any rounding rules, any lunch rules, any overtime rules, but you'll see all that over on the timesheet view. So to answer your question on this perspective, always put in the times, the missing times, or if you have to add a time card, add it showing the time punches for that particular employee, whatever they actually punched or should have punched in or should have punched out at. But the effective hours here, for example, let me show you here. This is a good one. So if you look at that, if we actually had paid the employee straight up on that time, the employee would have gotten 9 hours and 2 minutes. We have the rounding rule that says it's going to round to the nearest quarter hour. So what this is going to do is it's actually going to round it to either the 00, the 15, the 30, or the 45 on a time on a regular watch. So when you look at this 1559, it's going to round up to 1600. So you're actually going to have 1600 as your in punch on the timesheet view, and then you're going to have your timesheet base the time on your out punch here back to 1 o'clock. So that difference in time equals your 9 hours. That's why your 9 hours is here as your effective hours, or like I mentioned, rounded hours. Now we do that straight across the board. It goes on both sides of the clock. So that is how it is legal for us to do it, and we're not the only ones to do it. Many companies use the rounding rule. So what this basically also does is if an employee is a good example right above it. Let me go and clear my drawings here. If an employee was late, okay, so this employee was a few minutes early. This employee was a few minutes early. In both cases, this was round up. But in this case, 1602, he was actually clocked in at 402. He was 2 minutes late. So this was going to give him the benefit of the doubt and round back to 1400. Sorry, to 1600, which is 4 o'clock. So once again, it's kind of a both wins there, both sides there being played when you do the rounding rule. So more on that, I have a little document I can send out to everyone to share that rounding rule a little bit more. But keep in mind, it's going to the quarter hour. So if the employees are asked, keep close to that. Now, trust me, the employees will figure out that they can clock in 9 minutes early and get that extra 15 minutes because it's going to round back the other direction. When they do that, it becomes a supervision, becomes a corrective action kind of scenario where supervisor, manager, someone is giving them a kind of a discussion, a little talk with them. We shouldn't be able to go in the system every day to correct their punches, in other words. So let's go ahead and open up lines of communication with those employees and say, hey, let's do it right the first time. But more on that, that might be more of something we'll talk about more on a follow-up session just because of time constraints today. But that is a time card view. That's kind of going in there and editing punches. Now, some of you on this phone call are going to have to add punches because the employees have not been punching in or out. They've been writing down time manually on a timesheet. And that functionality is something very similar to do. Now, adding time cards, I'm going to skip up. It's going to be on page 6 of your document that I sent you. And adding time cards is very simple. Adding time cards actually is a step you do at the very top of the screen. And you actually have to do it on a employee-by-employee basis. You just can't do a mass load into the system. You have to do it one by one by employee. So what you would actually do is make sure that you have the job selected correctly. You make sure you have the employee selected correctly. So what that means when you're talking about the employees, you're actually going to go in there and tell the system, I want to add a punch for Cynthia Alcala, specifically her. So when I do that, I pick her off the list. I select the date range I want to enter time for. So maybe it's for a whole week or a weekend. Maybe she was all weekend she wasn't here or she didn't use the clock. So I'm going to start the 8th and the 9th. Let's go through today's date. And let's go ahead and then click on the far right hand side. We're going to click on this little link called, or this button called Add Time Card. So the system is actually going to populate the screen for you with this job, with this employee, with some dates in here. And that's all I'm going to get that screen ready for you, that you only have to go in there and put in those actual punch times for the employee. Once again, time card is for worked hours, because more specifically, the time card works and operates around the premise that someone has punched in with a time and out with a time. So once I go there, I go in there, I look at all my punches. I see that I have Cynthia available. I have some dates in here. Notice the dates didn't actually update, just updated with the last date. So I can go in here and just put in the date of the time in, the date of the time out, and I can go in there and say she worked from 1600, which is 4 o'clock, and she worked until 11 o'clock, which is 2300. Once again, put a reason code in there, employee fault, and then I go to the next line, do the next date, do the next time. That day she worked from 4 o'clock, 14:30, which is 2:30, and she stayed till 2300. But keep in mind, if you just skip a field, notice I'm skipping a field right now. I actually kind of quickly went over the date range, and I didn't change my date. If I had saved that, the system's going to scream at me, because the system has a rule that says I cannot put in an overabundance of hours on a particular day, and the threshold per day is 23 hours. So the system is going to say, whoa, something's wrong. No one in their right mind worked this job for 23 hours. Something is wrong. Fix it. So it's going to continue this process. So you have the ability of filling in as many dates you want here, as many times as you want for this one employee. If you don't touch a line, leave it alone. It's perfectly fine. If it's blank, it's not going to add that time for you. But once you're done, the bottom of the screen, and go in here and click on Save. And Save is going to allow you now to go in there and save your entries. Now, I'm not going to save it because I don't want to go in and muck up any of the different systems. There's different job sites that actually have valid employees, so I'm going to leave it alone. But that's clicking on Save, and that'll actually allow you to save your entry. But that's adding time cards. The only other thing I want to talk about from a time card perspective, so we can move on to the timesheet, is the approving of time cards. A little while ago, I used that word approving. Now, approving is for anybody on this phone call. You don't have to have the approver role to approve a time card. The approver role only approves timesheets, and I want to stress that. The approver, when I talk about approving a time, let me close my screen here first, sorry. When I talk about approving a time card, as selected up here at the top of the screen, this is telling you that these lines that are saying approval pending, I need to approve them. And what that basically means is you're saying that this employee's punches on that day that he had issues with, you'll see that this employee, Antonio Mendoza, had an issue punching in and punching out. And in this case, because it's a black background with yellow text, I know that, because I use that time card legend, that tells me that it happened on the Walter time clock. That says that Antonio went to the time clock, put his fingerprint, put his number, the system screamed back at him and said, nope, it's a fingerprint mismatch, I don't know you. So he tries again, screams back at him, nope, I'm not going to let you clock in because I don't know you. So after the third failed attempt, the system's going to say, you know what, I give up, I'm not going to argue with you anymore, you need to get to work. I'm going to go ahead and allow you to punch in, record that time, but I'm going to notify the supervisor that approval pending is needed. And that little message on the time clock will tell them approval pending needed. Supervisor approval needed. Same thing with the phone in, same thing with the other devices. If you can't be, if you're calling in from a unregistered device or using an unregistered device, the system's going to scream back at you and say, you know what, I give up. I'm going to let you go in, but I'm going to tell the supervisor on you that you need to get your story right when the supervisor asks you what's going on. So that's what the approval pendings are there for. The approval pendings do not appear in the timesheet until they are approved here on the time card. So they're going to stay here in approval pending status, which means that you will not be able to pay this employee for that time worked, even though he or she was actually there, until you come to this little checkbox on the left-hand side, check the boxes, and say approve, select the time card. The system will then, when you click on approve, select the time card, it's going to prompt you with a little window asking you, are you sure you want to approve these punches? You say yes, it'll approve the punches. They no longer become approval pendings, they turn into timesheet is open. So once again, approval pending and approval selected time cards is for anyone to do that. So that's kind of your checkpoint. You can go here and say, you know, Edward Hart is one of my employees here. So you're gonna go visit Edward. You're gonna call Edward Hart and say, or bring him into your office, or bring him aside and say, all right, Edward, explain to me what happened to you on the 9th. Oh, I had a problem with my fingerprint, or I cut my finger and the fingerprint reader wasn't picking up my fingerprint. So from there, you have the ability to go in there and troubleshoot this issue, either re-register the employee or give them a corrective counseling and say, you know what, I need you to do this correctly. You were doing it wrong. You put your finger upside down in the little reader, whatever it may be. But we can the ePay team here will assist you with those different scenarios. There's a lot of different scenarios that could occur or could happen when the employee punches in and out. So let's go through and let's visit the timesheet view. So this is the time card view, and I know we've had a lot of good questions here so far, so thank you for participating. One last question before I move on. It says, if we are fixing a punch-out issue, oh, that's the same one I already answered, so we're good there. We're good there. All right, so that's the time card view. Time card view, like I said, is where you review your worked punches, your in and out, stuff that the employee's actually been doing on the devices. So I'm going to go back to the home screen, and at the very top of the window, on top of my screen here, I have a home icon that takes me back to that main screen with all the different icons on it. But you also have a time card, as well as a timesheets icon there as well. And payroll we won't talk about on this call, but you have payroll icon there as well. So what you can do here is now you are on time cards. One of two ways. If you feel comfortable going back to the main opening window, you can always click on home. It'll take you back to the main opening screen and you can proceed from there. Or if you just want to go straight to timesheets, you have a timesheets icon at the top of the screen that you can just click on timesheets and proceed straight to timesheets. Now, one thing you're going to notice here is a big change in that how you see a time card versus a timesheet. Because time cards, look at here, glance at the screen because you have the in and out punches all demonstrated nicely for you. If I go to timesheets now, everything is going to be summarized for me. So this is kind of a good operator's tool because now you have the ability of going here and see how much time has been used, how much has been paid, etc., etc. Now, for those on the phone call that do not have access to pay rates, when you come to this view, you're not going to see anything that has a dollar figure. It's not going to be visible to you. So that is perfectly normal, so don't panic. So anything here that has a dollar figure or anything that says the word pay in it, like these columns right in here, all these columns, all these are not going to be visible to you. And that's another reason why I logged in as a company here in San Antonio instead of your local, because I did not want to share pay rates or pay information with anyone on the phone call by accident. So as you go through here, you'll be able to see quickly all your jobs. You're going to see all the different tasks that were worked, and that's going to help you. I'll go into more detail with this as you get used to the system and kind of get familiar with it. You'll get used to it as well, but we'll do a different follow-up session, and I'll go through in more detail with that on you. But bottom line, you'll see all your jobs listed here. If you only have one job to worry about, then you're only going to have one job listed here. But as I mentioned earlier, if you are biweekly, if you're doing a biweekly pay period, that means you're going to have 2 timesheets, 1 per week. So as I mentioned here, you're going to have a pay period. This pay period shows the full pay period. For this case is the 8th to the 21st. So when I do an 8th to 21st, that means I'm going to have one that's going to reflect a reporting period on the left-hand column here of the 8th to the 14th, which is week 1. Then I'll have another timesheet for that same job that's going to have a period of the 15th through the 21st. So once again, submitters, this is your role coming up here. You're going to be able to go in here and make those adjustments as needed. Okay, so let's get out here. Let me clear my screen. And kind of from that perspective here, you're at the timesheet view now. You've looked at your time cards. You're on a daily basis. Your employees have punched in and punched out. Over there, you didn't see any lunches. You didn't see any overtime rules. You didn't see none of that stuff going on. But now it's time to come over here and actually see all that come to fruition. So first thing to keep in mind is my pay period ended back on Friday. If I log in here right now and look at my dates at the top of the screen, the dates show the 4th to the 10th. I'm sorry, the 9th through the 10th, which is already the current pay week. So that is a problem there because if I'm looking at the current pay week, I'm looking at the wrong period that I'm about to pay. So first thing you want to do is make sure your dates are correct. So go in there and change your dates as needed. Now, for those that are following along, that first document, daily review and editing of time cards, I'm done with. I'm actually looking over at submitting of your timesheets. Now, for this particular step where I'm referring to, I'm on step 4 of page 2 already, and that is the dates. Make sure that you're checking your dates. Now, after that, once you pick your dates there, then you can click on the search button to actually go through and update your screen down below. So all this up down here I'm scribbling on will be updated once I click on search automatically. Once again, this is only going to pull in whatever jobs I had selected when I first logged in, or if more so the jobs I had access to seeing. So let me go in here to date from, and let me go ahead and change it to the last week, which is the 1st through the 7th. Now, notice I did a full week there. You do not have to do that on the timesheet view. When you go in there and actually do any portion of a week, so for example, if I had gone in front and let's put in the 3rd and 4th, it would actually pull up the whole week because the timesheet is operating on a full week period. If I accidentally put the 1st through the 8th, in this case, if I only put the 8th by accident, the 8th goes into a new pay week. The 7th is the end of the pay week, so then you would have 2 weeks showing on your screen. So just keep in mind, these dates are truly straight up on the actual date that you actually want to use or they're part of. So just make sure you put in the right date ranges. When I hit search, it'll update my screen down below, and you'll see all the different jobs that I have access to seeing. Now, one of the things that I'll point out to you, just from a big perspective, and we'll go in and look at the time, is this view, like I mentioned, will show you your regular hours that were used. So any of those on the call that are more of on a management review, want to care of where your hours are and want to manage from that level, the timesheet view is where you're going to go because it's going to show you your regular hours. It's going to show you any OT hours you may have had. It's going to tell you that by task, so you can do the cross-reference there. Budgets we won't talk about on this call because budgets we'll get those loaded download later for you guys. But you can see if you have access to pay, what your pay was, what your overtime pay was, total pay, etc. like that. So you have some information that you can actually use. And I won't go to the details of this on this call, but as well you can export that, like the time card view, you can export that into Excel as well. So you have some options for you to look at. But the way this works is when you're ready to submit your time, what you're going to do is you're going to go to your job record, you're going to click on it and open it up. To click on it, you're going to click on the job name, which is underlined right now. So you'll see that job link. And I'll pick on that first one called Ashford Oaks. When I go into Ashford Oaks, the system's going to show me every employee that worked. It's going to show their time summarized by day and by task. So that employee worked 2 different tasks or had 2 different rate types maybe. That'll all be summarized in this particular view. So I can look at that first one, Patricia Estrada there. She clocked in for 4.75 hours on Monday, 4.5 hours on Tuesday, 3 hours, 25 minutes on Wednesday, etc. One thing that is different, I want to pay attention to this, what I'm about to say. One thing that's different on the timesheet versus the time card is not only are you seeing summarized time on the timesheet view, but these hours are all based on equivalence of a pie per se. So 4.75 is really 4 hours and 45 minutes. 4.5 is 4 hours and 30 minutes. So etc. Just keep that mentality as you go through reviewing the time card screen. So your total hours here is 17 hours and 30 minutes, or 17.5 hours. Now the reason I bring that up is if I go back to the time card screen real fast, the punch times when you talk at the time card view, and let me go ahead and clear my criteria here to get everyone on the screen again. Let's do that. All right, so when I come in through here and look at all the punches, this time down here, and this is a good example down here, let me circle this for you on the screen. This punch right here for total hours, 808:30. That is 8.5. That is 8 hours, 30 minutes. So anytime you see any of the times in this particular column, those are your effective times, but they're based on hours and minutes. Timesheet is on hours and, portions of hours, I guess you're going to say. So 8.5 versus 8 hours, 30 minutes. And I just want to point that out because that can be a little confusing. And if you're looking at it a little wrong, some people will go in here and say, no, I need to put, instead of 8:30, I need 8:50 for 8.5, and that is not correct. 8:30 minutes there is correctly reflecting 8.5 hours. So I just want to point that out as a side note, just so you have that information in your back pocket. All right, so let's wrap this call up. So we're going to wrap this up by submitting timesheets. And how we're going to do is we're going to actually go in. We're going to go in on the timesheet view here. We've looked at our jobs, and we're actually going to go into the job now, like I said. And when you look at your job, as a submitter, you're going to glance through here. You're going to see and kind of get a ballpark picture to make sure that all the employees were paid. Now, if you're going to go through here and kind of say, you know what, wait a minute, we got a problem here. We have a blank spot here, we got a blank spot here, blank spot here. Okay, something's going on here. These employees all work 5 days. What's going on? You have the ability now to go back. This comes straight from the time card view. You can go back to the time card and add time. You can go back if need be, or you can just say, no, that's correct, and submit your timesheet. But as a submitter, your role here is to make sure that everyone is being paid correctly. If you have access to pay rates, you can see pay rates on the far right-hand side, and that's kind of the reason why I picked some of these jobs. You kind of see a varying level of rates. So you kind of put that together, and then kind of see the total pay. Now, one thing I'll say with total pay is we only show net here. What that basically means is once we sign off and submit and approve our timesheets, this is going to go over to corporate payroll, which they will process to JD Edwards, which then will take the benefits deductions, or take any other garnishments, etc., and give you the true pay or gross pay for that employee. So this is just based on worked hours here in the system. So going forward with this, once everything is good to go, as a submitter, you are confident the time is correct. You're going to go to the top of the grid. You're going to click on Submit. When I click on Submit now, I have the ability now to, a little window is going to pop up, and it's going to ask you, are you sure you want to submit this timesheet? And your response would be, yes, I do. So once I do, that's going to automatically complete that process of submitting that timesheet, and you are done for that week. Once again, you're doing this one per week, and I urge you that every Monday, just get in the habit, even if your payroll is not due on Monday, get in the habit of submitting every Monday. That way you can put to rest the last week. When it comes time to do your payroll and it's up time to tell the approver to continue their process, there is nothing you have to worry about. There's nothing you have to kind of remember what happened 2 weeks ago. Because the analogy I always say is, if you wait 2 weeks to do your changes, 2 weeks to go in here and add time and stuff like that, it's very similar to someone asking me what I had for breakfast yesterday. And I can't tell you, I don't remember what I had for breakfast yesterday, much less 2 weeks ago. So keep that in mind when you're going through here and doing your reviews of daily reviews, and then obviously when you come in here and submit your time. So that is really the very basics of submitting time. It's very simple. If you're taking care of all your time cards on a week-to-week basis, then you're not going to have any problem when you come back over here to actually submit, because all your time will be in order. It'll be nice and perfect like this, and you can then proceed. Now, the one thing I will point out is on the timesheet view, you may see these colors, and these colors right here that are orange in the middle of the screen, they're perfectly fine. That's just letting you know that something occurred with that punch, that it was really, someone went in there and added or made a change, to that particular punch. So maybe originally it was 4.25 hours, but someone went in there and changed the punch. Now it's 4.5. That's why they're orange there, just to let you know that something has occurred. Now, from this particular view, at any point, you can actually go in there and click on any one of these links of these punch times and actually see what made up that punch or that total time. So if I wanted to see on John Keene's time, John is right here, and I wanted to see what made up that 1.25 hours, because that's a little odd. He only worked 1.25 hours that day on Friday. What is going on there? Let me go see what made up that punch. I can actually go and click on that 1.25, and the system will actually pop up the actual it will return the actual punches from Blueforce time card. So you can actually see the time card entries that were there. So you kind of go up there and see his end punch, which was 1845 until 8 o'clock. So that's kind of give you detail. And as I said, in time, you'll get used to that piece, and we'll go through a recap and a little more informative session, kind of to follow up to today's call, and I'll go through some more of these functionalities. Now, as I mentioned earlier, timesheets is primarily just for where the system is going to summarize your time, and it's really just for non-worked hours. So if you have PTO, if you have any scenarios where an employee didn't work, you don't have to go through and go to the time card view. If you want to, you can. The time card view, as you saw, requires you to put an in and out punch, and that becomes a little cumbersome and a little tedious because now you have to remember, right, well, if the person didn't work here, what time do I actually punch him in and out of? Or should I do the regular shift, or what's going on? So in cases like that, we have PTO. For example, maybe you have a holiday coming up. Maybe this weekend you have a holiday, you have to pay for somebody. You can actually go in to this timesheet view and say, if this is the job that you want to work with, let me back out of here. When you go to the timesheet view, remember, this is the initial view you're going to get. You're going to see all your timesheets listed just one by one right here on this particular screen. I go into the actual timesheet I want to work with by clicking on the job link. And once I'm in there, at the very top left-hand corner of my grid down below, I have a link called Add Row. So if I ever want to add PTO, this is the way I'm going to do it. You only add into the timesheet, you're only adding hours that are PTO related or non-work scenarios. Keep in mind, worked hours go to time cards. So if I click on Add Row here, the system is going to now provide me a new row in which I can add an employee to this particular timesheet. Now, as I mentioned at the beginning, when we went to timesheet, I said timesheets are based on the job. So if I'm adding a timesheet for this job, and I'm looking for an employee that worked this job, then I am good to go. So to that note, I now can go in here and click on Add Row, and let me click on Add Row. And now I have the ability to go in here and add a new row. You'll see I have Save and Cancel as my options there. So let me go in here. And then I have kind of whole row wide open. So this is the one time that I would introduce you into rate types, because now you can now say, I need to enter a rate type that is non-worked. So basically a PTO rate type. Now, depending on your jobs, you may see different rate types. I can't, confirm or deny what you have right now on your setup. But if I'm working and looking for someone to add vacation time, for example, I'm going to look for the rate type called vacation. I'm going to go to the particular day in question, and I'm going to enter the number of hours that person worked vacation for that particular day, or is entitled to vacation for that day, I'm sorry. So Saturday he has 8 hours, Sunday he had 8 hours, Monday he had 8 hours vacation, and that's all he worked for vacation time. Once again, since it's a different rate type, you want to put it on a different line. And it's a different rate type because it's a non-worked scenario. And as you see, when I had that added new row, I could actually go through and pick the employee I want to work with. I could pick the task if it made a difference. But more so, when you're adding PTO, you always want to make sure you have the right employee and you have the right rate type. If you're trying to add time for something that's non-worked in here, it's not a good thing. The audit trail tracks all that, and it shows like we're adding time incorrectly in the system. So let's only add time this route through Add Row when we're actually adding non-worked scenarios or PTO. So that is kind of the general process of submitting timesheets and kind of getting through that process. Approvers that are on this phone call, and I'm going to kind of tidy it up here because we're coming kind of the end of our time here. But approvers, same process that we did for the submitters. Once you actually come in here, and I don't think I have any time yet that's been submitted yet for this group, but let's look at something real fast. Let's see if I can find anything. Actually, I got a few that are submitted. So when you go to your timesheet view and you come into timesheets and you go into that job as well, that job's timesheet, you'll be able to go in here and see the same view. The only difference is you have different links. It'll say submitted, and then you'll have two links to choose from, approve or reject. If you want to approve it, then you approve it. If you want to reject it, that means you want to throw it back at the submitter and say, fix it before I'm going to proceed and sign off my name to this particular timesheet. Now, approvers, the only thing you have to remember is you have one thing to do at the end of the pay period, and that's when you come into action. That's the last line of defense before the payroll process proceeds to corporate payroll. But approving, you'll approve each timesheet. You'll have two timesheets, one approval for each. Submitters, when you were submitting, just like I said a while ago, you had to submit one timesheet each as well. So bottom line, approval is very similar to submitting, but the approvers cannot do their role until the submitters obviously have submitted those timesheets. So the ePay team will help you with that process a little bit more in detail if need be, but this happens at the end of the pay period. So after the pay period ends on Friday, these functions open up and allow you to now go in and approve and or reject. So let me see if we have any questions, any concerns coming up here. So I got the add PTO question, so good question. Thanks for asking that as well. So I'm going to wrap it up here. I think that kind of gives you get your feet wet per se a little bit into using the time cards and time sheets just a tad. I have those two documents I shared with you in that email if you want to follow along with those. I've gotten a couple of emails while I've been on this phone call from you guys on some requests and stuff you need for like shift differentials and stuff like that. So thank you for that. But bottom line, actually go through your payroll and you go through your timesheets here and you notice that, you know what, someone's not getting paid correctly, or a shift differential is missing, or no lunches are being applied to this. Let us know. Do not wait and say, I'm going to process payroll and then I'll worry about it later. It doesn't work that way. Let us know so we can get that fixed. We can update the system. The system will automatically update your entries for you. And it'll take those lunches out. It'll apply those shift differentials. It'll do all that for you. That way you don't have to go back and do that manually. So bottom line, as submitters or approvers, yeah, you want to make sure your employees are punching in and out correctly. But at the end of the pay period, if you see something wrong as far as rules go, do not mess with it. Just go ahead and let us know on the ePay team, and we'll be happy to correct those for you and let you reprocess and kind of see all that information correctly before you actually submit and approve. So that is a side note. But kind of all week, I'll follow up with you guys individually, drop you a note and see if there's any questions, any concerns you may have. I know today is Monday, and I think it's a payday, so y'all may be able to log into Blueforce, start playing around, get used to the system, and don't be afraid to ask any questions. This is kind of we're at a point where we want you to ask questions, want you to kind of open up to us and let us know what we can do for you guys. So with that, I'm going to follow up with an email. You have my information, and we'll go through and attack any other concerns, issues one-on-one as needed. So we'll set up a follow-up call for later this week, or maybe even next week, maybe the same time slot if we can, and just kind of go a little bit more in depth and maybe talk about some specific issues you guys experienced this week. So I'll stop talking now. I'll say thank you all for joining us today. And I did record the session, which I typically do with all of my webinars. So I want to make this session available to all of you a little later, and I'll put it on YouTube out there so you can actually go out there and access it from home from anywhere you want to go. If you want to review any of this webinar or just listen to me again, I guess you can say, you can do that. So until we talk again, thank you so much for joining me, and we'll catch you later.